What is up, guys? It's your boy, New Year, New Me, Cacus, and today, with the start of a new year, it's time to look back at the highlights of the previous year. So in this video, we're going to be showcasing the 5 best exotic weapons that came out during 2023. So that includes the Lightfall big expansion and the accompanying Season of Defiance, then Season of the Deep, Season of the Witch, and lastly, Season of the Wish. Which exotics shined the brightest? Well, let's get started with number 5. And that's actually going to be the Vexcalibur exotic Glaive. Now, this may be a bit of a controversial pick. It comes from the Node.or.Avalon exotic mission from Season 20, and honestly, guys, I think this thing is pretty cracked. The intrinsic trait says that it fires a spread, it's equipped with a quick draining shield, blocking damage with your shield gradually bestows a void overshield to yourself and nearby allies. And then it has another unique trait here where it deals additional melee damage while protected by that overshield, and defeating targets with melee final blows while the overshield is active will refresh it. So what happens is a gameplay loop where you just block with your glaive shield for like 1 second to get just a little bit of shield, and then you melee a red bar and kill him in 1 hit, and then you get a full overshield. And then as long as you keep killing enemies, you get that full overshield refresh again and again and again. So you basically have a constant overshield, which means you're constantly doing more glaive melee damage. And guys, just this season in Season 23, they massively buffed glaives and a lot of things that work with glaives. For example, the Syntheseps exotic gauntlets for the Titan, that now does way more damage when using glaives specifically. So like right now, as I make this video, the Vexcalibur actually smacks. Like this thing hits super hard. I think it's a very, very good weapon. It's just not seeing a lot of play right now because why would you use a void weapon when solar weapons as well as strand weapons are juiced to the absolute gills with the seasonal artifact perks? As soon as the season changes over and we maybe get some perks that benefit void weapons, I would expect the Vexcalibur to see a bit more play. It's just overall a very, very good glaive if you want to use glaives. But moving on from there, pick number 4 here, guys. This is actually going to be the Wishkeeper exotic bow. Now, this thing barely made the 2023 cutoff, being introduced in December via the Star-Crossed exotic mission in Season of the Wish. And this thing is absolutely fantastic for crowd control, but specifically in Strand Builds, it shines, and Strand Builds are super meta right now. So you have the intrinsic trait Snare Weaver, where precision hits and final blows build energy towards a Snare Weaver arrow that can be fired from the hip. On impact, Snare Weaver arrows create a pattern of traps that suspend nearby targets. So you just get a few kills, you shoot that Snare Weaver arrow on the ground, it creates a big area of effect, and any enemies who are inside that area get suspended. That's good, but the real power of this weapon comes from the Silkbound Slayer unique trait it also has. This weapon deals bonus damage to suspended targets, and you gain faster draw time for a short duration when you suspend a target from any source or damage a suspended target with this weapon. So again, it works really well in Strand Builds when you already have suspend synergies. So you throw your suspend grenade and that triggers Silkbound Slayer. So you're shooting way faster, you're doing bonus damage, and then you're really easily racking up kills for your own Snare Weaver arrow to suspend even more targets, which is giving you a bunch of fragment activations in your Strand Build. So you're getting like your class ability back faster. There's things where if you kill a suspended target, you get an orb of power. Like, it works perfectly in suspend builds. And suspending is one of the most powerful effects available in the game. Even in PvP, the Wishkeeper is starting to see some play because, again, you throw your suspend grenade, you suspend someone, you use the Titan class ability, you suspend someone, and then you can potentially one-shot them with the Wishkeeper if you have the right combination of damage bonuses or they have low resilience. So, again, like, this thing is actually very powerful, playing around one of the most powerful things in the game, which is suspend. But moving on from there, guys, let's get on to the exotic weapon in the third slot, and that's going to be the Navigator Exotic Trace Rifle. Now this comes from the Ghosts of the Deep dungeon introduced in Season 21, and this thing by itself is pretty decent. It's just a Strand Trace Rifle. Strand right now is popping off thanks to the seasonal artifact perks, and actually funny enough, this thing's intrinsic trait says that firing this weapon at an ally grants woven mail to both the user and the target, and then its intrinsic trait says dealing sustained damage severs the target, and sever is a strand debuff where that target will do less damage like back to you, but it actually has a secret exotic perk, and when this thing first came out, I made a video on it talking about how if you shoot a target, when you get that sever, it also just gives you woven mail. So you don't actually have to shoot an ally to get woven mail. It'll give you woven mail when you're shooting like a yellow bar for an extended period of time. And woven mail provides a massive damage reduction benefit to you. So like this thing is just really good for triggering a bunch of different strand synergies. But the real power recently actually comes from its exotic catalyst. Now this catalyst lets you hold, reload, and then shoot, as you can see, a tangle into the air, like an anchor tangle into the air. And this lets you, if you have a grapple grenade, grapple on that tangle point, and that is actually going to refresh your grapple grenade. And so what that means is that you can do a grapple melee, because anytime you use a grapple grenade, you get a free like special grapple melee. So as you can see in the background gameplay, it lets you shoot this grapple point into the air, then you can use your grapple grenade to grapple, melee, grapple, melee, grapple, melee, and with a melee focused build, that does a ton of damage. In fact, if you are really quick, you can actually get a 1-2 punch shotgun shot, really quickly grapple, and then get that grapple melee for a massive chunk of damage. Like you can solo take down dungeon bosses with that combination. It's definitely hard to pull off, but when you do, it is a massive amount of damage. So being able to spawn these grapple points as well as just so many synergies within Strand Builds, the Navigator is pretty darn sweet. But next up at the number 2 slot, we have the Dragon's Breath Exotic Rocket Launcher. Now this actually comes from the Season's Pass for Season of the Wish, so you can get this thing right now even as a free-to-play player. And man, the Dragon's Breath is fantastic. The intrinsic trait says rockets embed themselves in struck targets and periodically eject incendiary fuel that inflicts scorch. The longer this weapon goes without firing, the more fuel the next rocket contains. It also has high octane, where igniting nearby targets partially replenishes fuel. This weapon refills itself from reserves upon gaining maximum fuel. And it also has an exotic catalyst, where this weapon replenishes its fuel faster. Defeating targets with this weapon causes them to periodically drop fire sprites. So overall, guys, you cannot treat this rocket launcher like you would most other rocket launchers, where you're just spamming all of your shots as quickly as possible. Instead, you should treat the Dragon's Breath like the Wither Horde or the Anarchy, where you're shooting them to apply damage over time, and then you're switching off to a different weapon to do damage at the same time that damage over time is ticking away. Because the Dragon's Breath with a fully charged, fully fueled up shot is gonna do a massive amount of damage. A single fully fueled up shot of the Dragon's Breath is gonna do the same damage as like 2 or 3 normal rocket launcher shots. It's just gonna take a lot longer for those scorch stacks to build up, those ignitions, all those projectiles flying away. It just does that damage over a longer period of time. But again, if you're using it as a backup weapon that you're shooting once and then switching off of to deal continuous damage with 2 weapons at once, man, your overall DPS numbers are incredible. And also, it's incredibly fuel efficient. Like 7 rounds of Dragon's Breath do a lot more damage overall if you are like, giving them the time to get fully fueled than 7 rounds of pretty much any other rocket launcher. Not to mention, this thing also has insane synergies with solar builds, right? It's causing Scorch, it's causing Ignition, it's making Fire Sprites. All of those are solar keywords. So you have fragments that improve your Scorch. They make your Ignitions give you grenade energy. They make collecting Fire Sprites give you a health regeneration, right? And the Dragon's Breath is doing all of these synergistic things. So just a great weapon. But it's not at the number 1 slot, because that is actually going to go to the Conditional Finality Exotic Shotgun. Now this comes from the Root of Nightmares raid within the Lightfall expansion. And honestly guys, I think this is number 1 by a pretty large margin. Like, I called how good this thing was when I got it. Like, the second day it came out, I was saying this thing does a crazy amount of damage for a special weapon. So the intrinsic trait is Split Decision. Dual barrels split into stasis and solar damage. And yeah, you only get 2 shots before you need to reload. But then it has the Paracausal Pellets trait, which says landing nearly all stasis pellets will freeze targets, and landing nearly all solar pellets will ignite targets. So if you get right up in a big bad yellow bar's face and then you shoot him twice, they're going to freeze, and then the next shot is going to pretty much shatter that freeze, so they get that big chunk of shatter damage, and then the second shot causes the ignite, and that ignite does a ton of damage. So yeah, you've only shot them with 2 shots of shotgun, but the shatter damage and the ignite damage add up to basically be the equivalent of shooting them with an entire 6-round magazine of a rapid fire frame shotgun, right? Like, those 2 rounds, because of these elemental effects, like, really do a massive chunk of damage in an extremely short period of time. But you don't have to shoot 2 rounds. Like, that's the beauty of the conditional finality. You can shoot targets once, freeze them, and then that's your crowd control. Like, I can't tell you how many times there's been, oh crap, there's a yellow bar knight about to smack me. Boom, 1 shot, he's frozen. And then I just don't shoot the second shot. I get out of the way of the melee, I get to safety, and then maybe I'll plug him with a second shot, or I just get out of there, throw a grenade, or whatever. Being able to freeze an enemy solid with 1 shot is pretty darn powerful. Not to mention, this thing got even more powerful when Bungie made the change so that elemental effects would stun champions. So like, freezing stuns unstoppable champions, I believe it is. So like, with the conditional finality, you run up to a champion, you get the freeze, you get the ignition, and you're stunning that champion because of those elemental effects, even when like shotguns aren't a featured anti-champion weapon. So that's also super, super powerful. Not to mention, it just does so much damage for a shot. Like, this thing has also been seeing a ton of play in PvP. It's been one of the most prolific PvP shotguns as well. So the conditional finality is just absolutely cracked. I use it all the time, and frankly, so should you. Like, people switch off because it gets kind of boring using one weapon over and over again, but honestly, you should probably switch back to the conditional finality. Like, that's how good it is. Guys, that's it for the video. Hope you enjoyed and found this informative. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That is linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.